All right, welcome to the first video post for HineSight. This afternoon, we're going to talk a little bit about my favorite doctor, Dr. Benjamin Carson. Now, if you've been following HineSight, you know I've had a little bit to say about him in the last couple of weeks. Go check out of hand, the post that I did on his speech at the National Prayer Breakfast. But he stepped in it again this week on Sean Hannity's show in response to a question about gay marriage, where he said that no one is allowed to change the traditional definition of marriage, whether it be homosexuals or NAMBLA, which is the North American Man-Boy Love Association, or people who engage in bestiality. And so, of course, that created a little media firestorm where people who support marriage equality were very, very upset because they said he compared or equated homosexuals to pedophilia and bestiality. And what I'm about to say in response to this may seem like I'm defending Dr. Carson a little bit, but actually, I think the fact that Dr. Carson was right in his response actually shows how wrong he still is about this thought process that he's going through. By the way, let me say, his response was sort of this traditional religious conservative response where they say, well, if you allow same-sex marriage, well, now you're going to have to allow pedophilia and bestiality, and nothing is further from the truth. But let's really quickly talk logically about what Dr. Carson said. When you're making an argument saying that no one should be allowed to do anything, you give yourself license to mention any group that you want to, because your whole point is that no one should be allowed to do something. So when you name the groups that you name where you say no one should be allowed to do this, you are not necessarily saying that those groups are similar to one another. And that was essentially Dr. Carson's defense. He defended himself on two shows yesterday, Andrea Mitchell Reports and on the Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer. And that was his argument. And he gave a really bad example involving fruit that was very confusing. But I don't think he had to do that. Really, he could have used his exact words or the same exact situation in order to make the point. So for example, if I say no one should change the definition of marriage, I could say no one is allowed to change that definition. It doesn't matter whether you're black, whether you're left-handed, or whether you're short. Now, it's clear to everyone that there's really no easy basis of comparison for those three groups. And it doesn't matter because I'm not arguing that those three groups are the same. I'm just giving you examples of groups to prove the point that no one would be allowed to change that definition. So Dr. Carson is very easily able to come in and defend himself by saying, and I think rightly defend himself by saying, I wasn't comparing homosexuals to people who engage in pedophilia and bestiality. I don't think those three things are the same. I was making the point that no one could do it, so I just picked three groups and said them. But here's the problem with that, Dr. Carson. There's a reason why your brain decided to put those three groups together. And I wish someone had asked him this question. Okay, Dr. Carson, you're right. You're saying those three groups are not the same. Fine. Then explain to me why you chose those three groups as the three groups to put in this grouping of people who cannot change the definition of marriage. Why didn't you choose black people, white people, left-handed people, short people, people who like the Cosby Show? It doesn't matter. If it really doesn't matter, then why did you put these three groups together? And I think Dr. Carson, who likes to speak off the cuff and not prepare for anything apparently, would have had a difficult time trying to answer that question. Now, I do think there is an answer to that question, and the answer to the question for Dr. Carson, I believe, is those three types of sex are types of sex that is different from heterosexual sex. I think that's why he so easily groups those three things together. But I think he's absolutely wrong about the idea that homosexual sex is in any way like pedophilia or bestiality. That's really what he's comparing. What he's comparing is types of sex, not necessarily talking about the changing definition of marriage. And that's why, even though he's logically right in his defense, He's actually giving us a window into what he really thinks about homosexuals and about gay marriage. And I think that's what people are complaining about, but they're jumping to the end of the argument without covering the section in the middle. And I think that's problematic, because then it allows people to jump in and make this very cogent defense of Dr. Carson that I actually think is not really a defense at all. So it's important that we talk about the means as well as the ends. And I think it's really important for Dr. Carson to think through things before he says them. I've been making this criticism of him for almost 3 weeks now. He does not think these things through. And if he would, he wouldn't step into hot water so much. So that's it for now. Come check us out on HineSight. Come check out some of these other posts over the last couple of weeks, and we'll see you real soon.